It started with the sound of gravel crunching. Not the usual soft crunch from deer cutting through the edge of my orchard. This was sharper, heavier, repetitive. I stepped out of the greenhouse with a flat of heirloom tomatoes in one hand and a growing sense of dread in the other. And there it was. 3 guys in safety vests, hard hats, and the blank over it faces of day laborers digging a trench straight through the southern edge of my property. Correction, my private driveway, my gravel, my land, my damn fence that was now lying on its side like roadkill. I called out, "Hey, what the hell is this?" And the shortest one, who looked like he'd seen this script before, didn't even pause his digging. He just muttered, "Drainage trench. Part of Silver Hills' beautification plan. We were told to start here." Then he pointed at a laminated folder taped to a wooden stake, a crude printout with the Silver Hills HOA logo on top and a barely legible map in the corner. My land was shaded in green, labeled Phase 3, Community Path Access. I stared at it, then at him, then at my torn-up fence and the ruts his backhoe had carved through 2 rows of perfectly healthy arugula. "Community path?" I asked. He shrugged. "Talk to the HOA." And that's when it hit me. I don't live in an HOA. I made damn sure of that when I bought this land. 7 acres of old ranch soil just outside the city limits, where the rules stop mattering and folks don't knock unless something's on fire. I didn't just avoid an HOA, I paid extra, fought through paperwork, zoning confusion, and a real estate agent who kept pushing condos with neighborhood charm, all to not have to deal with this exact brand of suburbia on steroids nonsense. And yet here it was, a trench on my land. Paid for, apparently, by people who didn't even have the decency to knock on my door. The next morning, I found a flyer in my mailbox. Glossy paper, bold lettering. Phase 3. Expansion, Silver Hills Community Enhancements. Including multi-use pathway access for all residents. Improving our neighborhood, one step at a time. My house, my damn house, was marked with a cheerful blue arrow. No phone number, no contact name, just a smiling stock photo of a woman walking her golden retriever on a paved trail surrounded by peach trees? They used my orchard in the promo shot. That's when the headache started. The slow, temple-throbbing kind that doesn't come from overwork or dehydration, but from the quiet realization that someone is fucking with you, and they think they're going to get away with it. When I bought the land 2 years ago, it was mostly weeds and ghosts. The house was a battered post-war craftsman that hadn't been lived in for close to a decade. The porch sagged, the windows rattled in the wind. There were holes in the roof big enough for a raccoon family reunion. But it had bones, and more importantly, it had roots. Out back, past the overgrown thistle and dry creek bed, stood the orchard. 43 trees, gnarled and half dead, with bark like old skin and branches that reached toward the sky like they remembered what sun felt like. It took me months to clean it up. Months of soil testing, pruning, mulching, watering by hand from the cistern because the old pump didn't work yet. That orchard was never supposed to survive, but it did. Every harvest I pulled off those trees felt personal, especially the perennials. The white flesh peaches that only grew on 5 trees near the north slope. They were a heritage variety, undocumented and fragile as hell. Local chefs started calling them Reeves Gold. One even offered to buy the rights to the name. But I didn't grow them to impress anyone. I grew them because no one else could, because the soil here still remembered how to hold sweetness. So when a group of bored retirees with HOA lanyards and clipboards starts laying down trenches like they own the place, on land I built with my own hands, it's not just a boundary issue, it's not just a fence, it's a damn invasion. And unfortunately for them, I keep my paperwork tidier than my porch. A week after the trench incident, I came home from the farmer's market to find a bright orange notice zip-tied to my front gate. At first I thought it was a parking citation, which was funny because I don't have a curb, or sidewalks, or streetlights, just gravel, fence posts, and whatever sunlight filters through the valley at 5 p.m. But no, this wasn't from the city, this was from the Silver Hills Homeowners Association, complete with a logo that looked suspiciously like it had been designed by someone who hated fonts and trees equally. Blocky letters, clip art of a sun rising over 3 houses that all looked exactly the same. It read, "Notice of Violation. Dear resident, your fencing, crop structures, and general property presentation are in violation of Silver Hills Community Aesthetic Standards, Section 5A and 5C. Immediate corrective action is required. Deadline, 10 business days. Please be advised, non-compliance may result in fines and property evaluation measures." Property evaluation measures? What the hell does that even mean? There was no signature, no phone number, just a stamped address, the HOA Clubhouse, a beige stucco shoebox tucked behind a row of manicured hedges about half a mile east of me. Technically a different neighborhood, a gated one at that. I called the number I found on their website. A woman answered with the kind of voice that's trained to sound polite while holding you at arm's length. Silver Hills Community Office, this is Brenda. Hi Brenda, I just got a violation notice from you guys about my fencing and aesthetic non-compliance. But I don't live in Silver Hills, I live adjacent, completely outside your jurisdiction. Silence on the other end. Then, can I get your address, please? I gave it. Another pause. I imagined her pulling up some spreadsheet with color-coded cells and pretend boundaries someone had drawn in PowerPoint. Finally, she said, yes, according to our updated community overlay plan, your property is now within the Silver Hills perimeter expansion area. You should have received a welcome packet in the mail. Number, I didn't receive a packet. What I received was a notice telling me that my working farm isn't aesthetically pleasing enough for your HOA, which I'm not a member of. She cleared her throat. If you have concerns, we invite you to attend our monthly community standards meeting. It's open to the public, residents and future residents. Future residents? Technically, your inclusion is pending final assessment. Ah, there it was. The HOA equivalent of a home invasion, not with a crowbar, but with a spreadsheet and a handful of yard signs. And this was their first move, testing the line. See if I'd push back, see if I'd roll over and mow my pastures into neat green strips to match their cloned front lawns, if I'd rip out my irrigation lines and trellises and century-old peach trees to meet some HOA-approved aesthetic drawn up by a bored dentist with control issues. Spoiler, I wouldn't. I didn't spend 2 years restoring soil, learning organic certification, and building a farm from nothing just to have Brenda from Silver Hills tell me my mulch piles don't blend with the visual profile of the surrounding homes. But still, I tried to be civil. I emailed. I called again. I even printed my original deed and plat map, highlighted all the boundaries, and dropped off a copy at the clubhouse. Brenda took it like I was handing her a used tissue. By Friday, I found a new sign posted near the end of my drive. Same font, same logo, new message. Entering Silver Hills expansion zone, all residents subject to community guidelines and appearance standards. They'd planted it in the ground with cement and zip ties like they were claiming the moon. I guess they figured I wouldn't notice, or maybe that I wouldn't care. But here's the thing, you don't grow trees unless you're patient. And I had time. At first, I thought they were just trying to annoy me into submission. The fake notices, the cemented sign, a couple passive-aggressive emails from community development liaisons with no return phone number. But then they got bold. It started when one of my deliveries got canceled. I grow for 5 restaurants and a weekend co-op in the valley. Nothing huge, but reliable. Hand-picked, no pesticides, soil-fed, and sun-ripened. People come for the peaches, especially the peaches. And one Friday morning, the co-op manager called and said they had to pull my crates from the floor. We got a complaint, she said. Something about unregistered pesticide use? I laughed. Then I stopped laughing when she said the health department had actually shown up. They didn't find anything, obviously, she added quickly, but it spooked the board. You know how tight everyone's liability insurance is right now? I did. Too well. That same week, 2 more restaurants quietly stopped responding to my messages. No calls, no texts, just radio silence. Then came the irrigation issue. There's a creek that runs behind my property, shallow and dry most of the year, but after a good rain, it feeds into my retention pond. That pond keeps my orchard alive through most of August. Someone rerouted it. I came out one morning and saw that the small dirt path I'd shaped with my own hands, years of balancing the flow just right, was filled in, flattened, and about 50 yards upstream, a new trench had been dug, channeling the runoff toward a culvert that didn't exist 3 days ago. I followed it uphill and found freshly laid gravel leading to one of Silver Hills' back lots. Empty land, zoned for recreational green space, according to the new maps I had no part in approving. I put in a call to the county water board. They logged my complaint but told me the new drainage was under evaluation. When I asked who submitted the change, they gave me an address. The HOA clubhouse. I asked for a name. They said Gregory Fenshaw. I'd only met him once, about a year ago, back when I first moved in. He showed up in khakis and a tucked-in polo shirt like he was headed to a PTA meeting he planned to dominate. He didn't knock, just leaned on the fence post and said, "You planning to sell all that produce out of here?" I nodded. He looked me up and down. Well, don't take this the wrong way, but this isn't really the kind of neighborhood where people do roadside farm stands. I smiled. Good thing I'm not in your neighborhood. He smiled back, but it didn't touch his eyes. Not yet. I should have known that wasn't a joke. Now here he was, taking swipes at me from every angle, through back channels, city departments, and suddenly unfriendly neighbors who started calling me that farm guy in tones that made farmer sound like a slur. I lost about a third of my peach crop from the water shift. The trees on the south end dried up fast, faster than I could compensate. One of them, the oldest, just shriveled and dropped its fruit early. That tree had survived droughts, frosts, and fungus. It didn't survive Gregory. I stood there the morning it cracked, staring at the exposed bark and felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not even grief. Something colder. There are two kinds of people in this world, the ones who build things with their hands and the ones who send other people to break them. Gregory Fenshaw had never planted a damn thing in his life, but he was good at uprooting. I gave them every chance to act like grown-ups. After the water diversion, I drove straight to the county office and filed a formal complaint. Not just with the water board, but with zoning, property records, and the agricultural commissioner. I had maps, photos, and time-stamped drone-free evidence, good old-fashioned boots-on-the-ground documentation, the kind you print in color and slide into a 3-ring binder like your dignity depends on it. I even included the plat survey for my purchase contract, the one that clearly marked my property line, the original drainage path, and the language that said in plain English, "This parcel lies outside the boundaries of any existing homeowners association." I turned it all in, smiled politely, and left feeling, if not confident, then at least like I'd done my part. A week later, I got a call. "Well, Mr. Reeves," the clerk said, using the tone people reserve for giving bad news with a forced smile, "the issue's a little complicated. Silver Hills recently submitted a development overlay and there's some jurisdictional ambiguity." "Jurisdictional ambiguity," I repeated. "You mean they're making stuff up and you haven't figured out how to tell them no yet?" He cleared his throat. "It's not quite that simple." "Sure it is," I said. "They're claiming land that isn't theirs and building things they have no right to. I gave you every document showing that. So unless my deed's fake or your county map system's been hacked, it is that simple." More throat clearing. Then, "Well, these matters sometimes take time to process." Of course they do. So I waited. Meanwhile, I attended one of their so-called community meetings. I had to enter through a coded gate like I was sneaking into a retirement fortress. Inside, a beige room filled with plastic chairs, bad coffee, and people named Dennis arguing over shrub height requirements. When I introduced myself during the open comments period and started explaining the situation, the room got quiet fast. Not curious quiet, defensive quiet. Gregory was there, naturally seated at the front table with a stack of papers and that half smile he wore like armor. "I don't believe we've invited outside commentary tonight," he said smoothly. "These meetings are for residents." "I own property directly adjacent to yours," I replied, "which you've recently and illegally claimed partial control over. So yeah, I think I qualify." He adjusted his tie. "That's not how expansion zoning works. We're following the standard community development protocol." I held up the same 3-ring binder I'd taken to the county office. "This says otherwise." Gregory didn't even glance at it. Someone in the back asked if this was going to take a while. I was given 2 more minutes to speak. I used 30 seconds. Then I left. On the way out, Brenda from the office caught up to me. "You might consider just joining," she said, voice lowered like she was offering me insider stock tips. "If you become a member, the process gets a lot easier." "Easier for who?" I asked. She smiled. "Well, for everyone." I didn't respond, but I did send an email the next day to their board. Short, calm, professional. "Dear Silver Hills HOA, I am formally requesting that you cease all activity involving my property and retract any claims of oversight or expansion involving my land. I am not, and have never been, a member of your association. Sincerely, Malcolm Reeves." No response. A few days later, a city inspector left a tag on my gate citing potential erosion risk due to unauthorized terrain alteration near the south edge of my orchard. I hadn't touched that area since they bulldozed my drainage line. That's when it clicked. They weren't just stonewalling, they were pushing me, testing how much I'd take before I either sold, submitted, or slipped up. But I didn't grow up in a world where giving up was a long-term strategy. I was raised to outlast storms, not chase them, so I went quiet. Because the only thing more dangerous than a man who's angry is a man who's patient. You ever feel that click in your chest? Not your heart, not your gut. That deep, cold click behind the ribs when something finally locks into place, when the pieces you've been dragging around in the dark suddenly line up and the whole ugly shape of it stares back at you. Yeah, It hit me in the produce aisle of a grocery store I hadn't been to in months. I'd driven across town to clear my head. No farmer's market that day, no harvest to manage, just me and the quiet hum of a store that didn't know my name. I was grabbing a bunch of basil when I noticed a display near the front. Fresh from Fenshaw Acres, local, organic, family-owned. Neat cardboard signs, little chalkboard pricing tags, a pile of peaches that looked almost like mine. But they weren't. They were close, too close. Same color, same texture, but flatter, less fragrant. You could smell the difference before you even touched one. I picked one up and flipped the tag. It said, Heritage White Peach, locally trademarked, cultivated in limited batches. I stared at it for a long second. Then I walked out without buying a damn thing. Back home, I started digging. Not in the dirt this time, online. Fenshaw Acres, according to their splashy new website, had been operating in the region for over 12 years, but their digital trail only started 6 months ago. New domain, fresh branding, social media launch in March, and a sudden uptick in product placement at every market I used to sell to. Every one. I kept digging. The property listed as their orchard, registered under a company called GF Management Holdings. I checked the LLC filing. It took me all of 3 minutes to find the signer's name. Richard Fenshaw, Gregory's brother. Of course it was. I sat there for a while, just staring at the screen. I wasn't even mad at first, just numb, like finding mold in the wall and realizing it's been there for months, breathing on you while you sleep. The harassment, the trench, the fake zoning maps, the rerouted creek, the inspectors, the PR moves, none of it was about community standards. This wasn't about appearance, it was business. They were trying to clear the competition. I was the competition. My peaches were better, my prices were lower, and I wasn't under contract with some grocery chain that took a 40% cut for slapping your name on a sticker. I grow, I sell, I deliver. They couldn't beat that. So Gregory did what people like him always do when they can't win fair. He reached for the rules, then bent them until they broke. But this was bigger than zoning. They weren't just trying to sabotage me, they were stealing from me. Because those peaches on that shelf, they didn't just look like mine, they were. At least the seeds were. Back in February, I'd done a one-time collaboration with a nursery out in the valley, sent them a small crate of pit samples and grafting notes for a potential heritage cultivation program. It never went anywhere, radio silence after March. Guess who acquired that nursery in April? GF Management Holdings. They took my pits, regrew them, and slapped a family name on the box. And Gregory, president of Silver Hills HOA, had been using his authority to pressure me off my land so his brother could sell knockoffs of my crop without competition. It wasn't just personal, it was theft, strategic, calculated, and it had just become a very different kind of fight. I didn't go to war. I started a spreadsheet. See, when you work soil for a living, you learn a few things. You learn to wait, to watch, to read every crack in the ground like it's a map of the next 3 months. You learn that revenge, like peaches, doesn't ripen overnight. So I got organized. Step 1, paperwork. I dug out every single document I'd collected since the day I signed for the land. The original deed, the plat map, the zoning designation, water rights, easement boundaries, the full title chain, going back 50 years. Then I pulled the new expansion maps the HOA had been mailing around like gospel, laid them side by side. You could see the lie plain as day. They didn't just redraw the border, they swallowed half a dozen parcels like a kid outlining a dinosaur on a napkin. I scanned everything, filed copies with the county recorder's office, marked and time-stamped every change, put it all in a cloud folder labeled in case they get cute. Step 2, agriculture. I called my certifier and asked for a new lab test on my soil, just to be safe. I wanted proof in writing that my farm was clean, no pesticides, no chemicals, just dirt and patience. I had them notarize it. Then I printed it on heavyweight paper and mailed a copy directly to the county health office with a cheerful note. Just to clarify, I grow better than your friends lie. Step 3, intellectual property. This one was personal. I reached out to the old horticulture professor who helped me restore my peaches, told him what I'd found. He was livid, said he remembered my samples, and that if they'd been passed to a third party without license, I had legal grounds for misappropriation of cultivar rights. Turns out my old professor had friends, including a retired USDA rep with deep experience in agricultural patents and plant variety protection. 2 phone calls later, I had a pending inquiry into the propagation source of Fenshaw Acres Heritage Peach. If they couldn't prove provenance, they were in violation of the Plant Variety Protection Act. That's a federal problem. Step 4. Public records. I filed an ethics complaint against Gregory Fenshaw with the city board. Conflict of interest, abuse of office, misuse of community funds to pursue personal and familial business advantage. I attached the receipts, Gregory's name on HOA meeting minutes where they discussed expanding into my land, Richard's name on the LLC tied to the farm using my genetics, the water rerouting application submitted from the HOA clubhouse, and because I'm a man who believes in letting the truth stretch its legs, I sent the whole file to a local food and farming columnist I knew back when I was still doing engineering contracts in the Bay. She owed me a favor. Step 5. Community. I didn't want sympathy, I wanted accuracy. So I hosted a tour. Quiet invite, no flyers, just a few trusted customers, chefs, neighbors who still waved when they passed. Walked them through the orchard, showed them the scars on the trees, the dirt path where the trench used to be, the shriveled husks of fruit on the south end. I didn't raise my voice, didn't point fingers, just told them the story. And at the end, I handed each one a small crate of peaches, no charge. Just remember what these taste like, I said. That's all I ask. The thing about planting roots is, you don't always know how far they reach. But Gregory was about to find out, because I wasn't the only one he'd underestimated, and I sure as hell wasn't the only one watching. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to get. A friend at the county clerk's office, retired now but still plugged in, called to let me know something interesting had popped up in the zoning docket. Silver Hills just pulled their application, she said. Full withdrawal of the overlay expansion plan, no explanation given. I didn't say anything at first. Then I asked, was it before or after the ethics complaint was logged, and she laughed. Oh, honey, that complaint's been printed and passed around like office gossip. You made a lot of people nervous, especially the ones with ties to his brother's LLC. South, that was the first domino. The second came 2 days later when the county agricultural office called to request a site visit. For me, not them. Said they'd received credible documentation of possible unauthorized propagation of a registered cultivar. I offered them coffee, let them take their time, walked them through the orchard, handed over my soil reports, my grafting records, the original email trail from the nursery I'd worked with, and when they asked if I could identify the trees in question, I smiled and said, sure. If they've got my peaches, they'll have a subtle blemish on the third leaf from the graft line, a scar from a late-season frost. Only happens in the north slope during a dry bloom. It's unique to this orchard. Every clone carries it. They wrote that down. Fenshaw Acres, it turns out, had at least a dozen. The USDA inquiry wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it was federal. Meanwhile, my old Bay Area journalist friend dropped her piece. Front page of the local section, syndicated across 3 regional outlets. Peaches and Power, how a California HOA tried to erase a black farmer's legacy for profit. She didn't pull punches, detailed every move the HOA made, quoted my complaint, laid out the family connection between Gregory and Richard Fenshaw like an oil slick across a clean pond. There was even a sidebar with a close-up of one of the stolen peaches and a caption that read, Left, Reeves Gold, Right, Fenshaw, Heritage, Taste Test Pending. Comments flooded in. So did calls from buyers who'd ghosted me. One restaurant owner left a voicemail almost stammering, said they weren't aware of the full story and wanted to rebuild the relationship. I didn't say yes, I didn't say no, I let them sit with it. But the best part? At the next Silver Hills HOA meeting, recorded and leaked by a resident who, I assume, had finally had enough, Gregory stood up in front of a half-empty clubhouse and tried to explain. He blamed the county, then the media, then miscommunications about the expansion zone. He even threw Richard under the bus, saying he wasn't fully aware of the business practices of his brother's farm. Someone in the back shouted, "Didn't you sign the water reroute permit yourself?" Gregory tried to respond. Someone else coughed the word resign. The video cut off, but that was enough. A week later, Gregory Fenshaw stepped down, due to personal matters. Richard's farm scrubbed their website, and I received a certified letter from the Silver Hills HOA formally acknowledging that my land was not and never had been under their jurisdiction. No apology, no compensation, but it came on expensive paper, which is always a good sign you hit them where it hurts. You ever seen a man pretend he's not drowning while holding a microphone? That was Gregory Fenshaw on local news. Pressed shirt, new haircut, and the kind of forced half smile that said someone had told him to just get ahead of it. He stood in front of a Silver Hills backdrop with the HOA seal behind him like it still meant something and said the words, We deeply regret any misunderstanding with Mr. Reeves and the community. A misunderstanding, like they'd accidentally rerouted my water, accidentally faked their boundary map, accidentally tried to absorb my farm and bury me in fines while his brother sold my peaches under a different name. The anchor nodded along like she was hosting a cooking segment, but the comment section did not. Pretty big misunderstanding for a guy who forged a trench across someone else's land. Did he misunderstand USDA law too? This is what HOA power trips look like. My favorite was just, Gregory Fenshaw gentrified a fruit. Within 48 hours, the County Ethics Board released a statement confirming an open investigation into conflict of interest and abuse of office by former Silver Hills HOA president Gregory Fenshaw. They didn't name his brother directly. They didn't have to. People put it together fast. Fenshaw Acres' social media went dark. Their website redirected to a blank splash page that said, "Coming soon, under construction." But it didn't stop there. The residents of Silver Hills called a special vote. 62% turned out. Over half voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Turns out a lot of them were sick of the rules, the constant fines, the bullying. Gregory was just the final straw. Some moved, some stayed, but the old signs came down. The gate code was changed. No one applied to form a new board. They were done. And me? Well, things got busy. I had more demand than I could handle. 3 restaurants sent chefs to tour the orchard in person. A co-op in Oakland offered to buy my entire early fall harvest up front. I had to build a new cold storage shed just to keep up. And then came the state representative. He showed up with a clipboard, a camera crew, and a proposal. Apparently, my land now qualified for heritage preservation status due to my cultivar documentation and my contribution to California agricultural legacy. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I signed. Now the farm is officially recognized, protected, and untouchable by any future community overlay nonsense. Gregory's name hasn't come up in months, but people still remember the story. Teachers bring their students for field trips. There's a sign near the orchard gate now, installed by the Historical Commission. Real brass, deep etched, Reeves Orchard. Founded 2022. Grown from legacy, defended with patience. It's quiet now. Not the kind of quiet that comes from nothing happening. The kind that comes from things settling where they're supposed to be. The kind of quiet you earn. Most mornings I sit on the back porch with my coffee and listen to the drip line ticking through the orchard. The leaves rustle just enough to remind me they're alive, that they're growing. The southern row, the one that got scorched when the creek was rerouted, has almost bounced back. Not all the trees made it, but enough did. The oldest one still has that black scar down the trunk from the stress. I left it there. Feels honest. I grafted a new seedling from the original root, planted it 20 feet north where the soil's better, called it Reeves Revival on the nursery tag mostly as a joke to myself. The new leaves came in strong. It's not just peaches anymore. I've got cucumbers, squash, early tomatoes, and a row of red okra that no one in this county knew what to do with until I showed up at the co-op with samples. Now they call it Reeves Firefingers. I'm not sure if that's good branding or a health code violation, but it sells. Sometimes people ask me if I ever see Gregory. I don't. Last I heard, he moved out to Nevada to be closer to family, which I assume means farther from subpoenas. I didn't follow the lawsuit against his brother. I didn't have to. That was someone else's harvest to manage. What mattered was my land. Still mine. Still standing. No signs, no fences, no cemented stakes with HOA logos stamped on them like some bad country club golf course. Just trees, soil, and time. A few months ago, I got a handwritten note in the mail. It was from one of the Silver Hills residents who voted to dissolve the HOA. She said she'd never grown anything in her life, but after everything that happened, she planted a lemon tree in her yard. Said it bloomed last week. I kept the note, taped it to the fridge right next to a photo of my grandfather standing in front of an old field in Mississippi with a smile on his face and dust on his boots. He didn't have land of his own, but he always said one day we would, and here we are.